What are the best practices, or what do we want with any public nonprofit that's in any sector, but in this case, which has a relationship focus? And the first thing that I think is important is an integrated paradigm. Relationships don't just begin and end with a sexual act. They don't just begin and act with, or begin and end with asking to go out with someone. And so within any relationship, be it for reasons of death or mutual or one person's choice, a relationship has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. It also, in the integrated system of heart, mind, and body, touches heart, mind, and body. Physical interactions touch the heart and the mind. Mental, emotional actions often influence not only the body of the person feeling or thinking these things, but their partner. And so something that addresses not only sex and love, but also strategy. And then within the general paradigm of a public service organization, the public comes first, is the pretense upon which any tax sanction or any tax haven is given to an organization. It is on the premise that serving the public comes first, and so a focus on not only individuals but on feedback from the public that is served is a very important part of the paradigm. The next thing we want is success. If we go to a school, if we attend an event with the goal of having a better relationship, we want to have a better relationship. And ideally not just a better relationship, but one that works. And in the cycle between competency and love, the masculine and feminine expressions of relating, when you love someone, you care enough to see them. When you love someone, you love enough to care, you care enough to see them. As you see with caring and patience, you understand. And with understanding comes empathy. With empathy and understanding comes attunement. With attunement, which is an iterative feedback loop where you try something and you get feedback, and you try something again and you get feedback, and you moderate the behavior, you result in success, you result in competency. Or you result in competency. Competency leads to success. Success leads back to love. It is a natural human state when we are safe, when we feel safe, when we are in a trustworthy relationship in which we feel trust. When there's success, it is success at delivering attuned well-being between one human being and another. You have pleasure. And these synergize into a natural feeling of openness that we call love. And it's this process, when you love competently, you succeed and generate the feeling of love in the other human being. And in order to feel secure and safe and trusting, etc., we have to engage with one another in a way that facilitates the journey through our human needs of survival, security, a sense of love and belonging for who we are, a sense of self-esteem that we like the person we are and are becoming, the development of our unique talents and gifts, which then generate abundance and well-being in the community, and a sense of going beyond ourselves to be in service to something bigger, something that is an inevitable flowering with anyone who is secure in their survival, who has a sense of love and belonging, who has a sense of self-esteem, and is growing into their full potential. It is an inevitable synergy of those things that the need to be a part and to serve something bigger emerges. And so we want success in this domain. And this need for success leads directly to a data-based framework for interacting. If you have your blindfold on and you can't see if you're backing into another car or not, you don't know if you're succeeding or not. And the data that is most relevant in this scenario is the impact over time in different segments of relationship and in different segments of our lives of the technology, of the teaching, of the interaction. And we want the interactions we're having to have a consistent boost in everyone involved's ability to survive, feel secure, have a sense of love and belonging, have a sense of self-esteem, to develop their unique talents, bring that abundantly into the community, creating wealth, creating synergy, and out of that coming the need to serve and be of service. We want the best technology, which currently the best technology for real-time statistical analysis of human needs is app technology, because an app can reveal at a glance what percentage of the community is in survival, what percentage of the community is in security, meaning they're surviving but it's not secure, what percentage of the community is feeling a sense of love and belonging, what percentage is meeting human needs, and then to zoom in to who are the individuals in crisis, in that ability of not being able to meet basic needs. And then what are the protocols? We want best practices for all this terrain. And that's really what we're learning. We're learning the discipline and the art of knowing what behavior in a given situation, what behavior when someone is homeless, for example, within the community, most facilitates sustained survival. And by sustainable, as much as possible, moving someone into a place of independence as opposed to chronic dependence. What best practices work within a given relationship, within the community at large? We want transparency and integrity in leadership. And with that transparency, one of the most important bits of data is what area who in leadership is succeeding in and what area who in leadership is failing in their own marriages, with their clients. What areas are the client base of this leader benefiting or not benefiting relative to another leader? Because people have different needs. And if you understand where someone is strong and where they're weak, where they've got it together and where they don't, you can better decide which leader, which teacher you want to learn from and be supported. We also have the need for funded innovation. In the larger context of our culture, we have a tremendous amount of chauvinism, which, as it shows up in feminine terrain, we see a phenomena in our culture where preparing for business, which is a more masculine terrain, is fairly heavily funded. People don't think anything about going $100,000 into debt, for example, to learn a competency that will help them in business. But in the feminine terrain of relationships, that's seen as a frill within a chauvinistic culture. And to some extent, this is consistent with the hierarchy of human needs. If you can't survive, if you're not secure in your survival, then it's very difficult, if not impossible, to conduct a growing, healthy relationship, which is one of the reasons why it is important to track and play a role in the security and survival of members of a relationship-oriented community. If one is operating out of the traumatic brain of fight, flight, and freeze, you will decimate your relationships as a general rule. And so it's unreasonable to some extent to expect someone in trauma to behave consistent with the laws of empathy, because for them to be in trauma and in crisis and in survival in a chronic state within a community suggests an undeniable truth, which is that the community does not love them enough to see them, does not love them enough to care, to develop a relationship in which their survival and security is growing. And so the sociopathic disinterest in a community member in survival is mirrored by the sociopathic brain within the individual of fight, flight, and freeze, and there will be mutual disconnect as a result of that failure on both parts. But it is a mutual failure when a community ignores the chronic trauma or pain of its individuals. The individual will become more and more self-centered in order to survive and feel secure in a variety of ways that are expedient, which is what people do when they're in survival. However, for an organization to grow in this field of love and belonging and self-esteem, etc., it must have funded innovation. It must be iterating and growing. And this is up to the community, ultimately, to value the domain enough to develop excellence within that domain, to love enough to care, and to care enough to see what is and is not working, and to develop new technology that works better and that will be reflected in ongoing updates of statistical data. Meaning an organization or a community is failing if more of its people are becoming homeless, if sexual addiction is left in a chronic state and is doing harm in the community, if infidelity, unfaithfulness, and betrayal as part of that addiction is destroying ties of trust in the community. And it is the question, do we love ourselves enough in feminine terrain to develop the technology to be competent in feminine terrain to create sustainability? We also want an organization that taps its community wealth. In any community, the largest segment of wealth exists in the skills, the passion, the uniqueness, the money, the time of the community members. That is where 80% of the wealth in any community lies. And so we want an organization that makes it easy for those resources to be recognized, to be honored, and to be contributed in a win-win way. For teams to be able to be formed, for someone to say, I want to create a team to create traumatic repair in the community. Who has listed trauma as a skill set? Who has shown an interest to volunteer time? Who has shown an interest to volunteer money? For what priorities? And can those people come together in a way to transcend the power structure? A decentralized power structure, something that's taking place in world software, something that's taking place in the sharing economy, Lisa Gansk has written significantly about that, and one of the founders of Etsy, etc., to go into to reach the peak the peak synergy within a community. You want to empower decentralized community members to make a difference and have that be reflected more in data, in the feedback of community members, than in a centralized power structure. We also want accountability. If there is harm or violation of mission within a community, within individuals, we want a framework where those who violate best practices pay the price of the violation, so that it does not destroy the sustainability of the whole community. Because if a minority of people or a minority of actions are undermining the wealth, the synergy, the trust, etc., within the whole community, and everyone else is footing the bill for that, it can become more of a drain in energy for those who are making the most positive contribution. And so you want accountability for those who pull that energy down by making amends, by turning that deficit into a positive with a conscious commitment and willingness. And finally, you want a mapping of terrain of the field. You want as much data as possible in the field. And as a result of that data, you want the community to be able to grow independently and organically, so that each time they come together, they are more well-resourced on the inside than when they last met. This is how you have a growing and vital culture rather than a stagnant or deteriorating culture. You want to map the terrains within the field, which is quite large in relationship, and you want to facilitate the sharing of resources. And this is particularly important if we look at the paradigm of a public nonprofit with the public first. If, for example, another workshop does a better job than the organization at developing awareness of relationship skills, for example, there's at least 36 specific relationship skills, and they each, to some extent, function independently, but they also synergize with one another. And if another organization does a better job of teaching the skill of empathic listening, for example, than the core modules within an organization, you actually want your people to go out and learn active or dynamic listening from them. Or if someone else does a better job of teaching traumatic repair, you want your community to benefit from the best, so that as they come back, they're bringing those best practices back to your organization. And so this comes with decentralizing mapping to a certain extent and letting the intelligence of the public, and this is something Microsoft used to be a control freak, buying up competitive companies and shutting them down so that they could foist an ineffective operating system and programs, onto the public. And in that paradigm, where there were relatively few innovators out there that could connect and build open source software, etc., Microsoft was able to make a lot of money in the process of shutting down better software with its war chest. But Microsoft has pivoted recently, and we'll see at some point if Apple does the same, because even with 50,000 competent programmers, there are millions of amateurs collaborating to rewrite the code of world software, which is why most Fortune 100 companies are now using Linux rather than Microsoft. Because when you create technology that allows the sharing of best practices, and you can always assume that 1,000 people are going to share what's good for them, what's good for those that they love. You cannot always assume that a CEO is going to do what's best for the consumer. The control-based, fear-based, masculine paradigm of chauvinistic thinking is more about dominance and fear. And so you don't decentralize. But Microsoft has lost the war by losing to the sharing economy, which is why it has joined it. And the mathematics of a sharing platform in which everyone has free voice, and whether it's a Quora-like format where everyone upvotes the best ideas, and if 80% of your public benefits from this idea, this technology, this resource, this workshop, then there's an 80% chance that the person reading and opening up to that data will benefit as well. And that's what you want to happen. And so there is a tension in the transition from a centralized power structure, which is why they very rarely let go of it on their own and participate. And the idea that everyone would have free access to all the information and can judge for themselves, thus developing independent assessing abilities, etc., and benefiting from other people's past experience. But this dramatically, by about a 500% margin, opens up the doorway to the public. And a couple of things happen when an organization follows this public-first approach above any fear, scarcity dynamics at home. It may become a decentralized information platform where everyone else in different parts of the country and the world does the technology or the implementation better than they do. And so people come, and the value becomes that of one of, you can count on this place to get the most accurate information about what works and what doesn't. And so the value becomes as a port of sharing and information. That's still winning. When your mission is to serve the public, and your public wins 500% more because you revealed that you didn't do something as good as some other place, you've now served your mission by a 500% higher margin. And there's nothing wrong with the most competent people in any given field writing the best practices, leading the best practices. But hopefully, when you have some core best practices of your own, you refine those and start sharing in a framework where other organizations send people to learn those things with you, and you send people to learn those things with other people, and you have a synergy within multiple organizations. And this is, I believe, what any informed member of the public would wish for a public nonprofit with a relationship focus. Now, the map that I've outlined for HI as a possibility, this or better, moves in those directions significantly at a cost that is far less than the value that is created. It's common knowledge that as one gets older and gets more perspective on the purpose and meaning of this life, that we value the quality of our relationships and our ability to love and be loved successfully, with competency, with integrity, above all other things. And so while it's the third in our hierarchy of needs, at the higher you get in the hierarchy, the more those accomplishments, developing one's gifts, becoming the person one wants to become, having self-esteem, which no one sets out to be an addict, to be a junkie, to betray, and no one sets out. That's not consistent with the development of self-esteem. We all want to be someone that we admire. And so as an organization facilitates the tracking of how we're doing in that domain and provides opportunities to do better and enjoy the data feedback, yes, that this worked, that really helped. We not only move towards a much more integrated, safe, and sustainable organization or public, we also move towards the people we want to be, the gap from which is one of the biggest sources of pain.